Okay, managing credentials and training in QualiWare. I thought this use case was a little bit intriguing because it goes outside of our regular wheelhouse, which is, as you know, enterprise architecture, business process management, governance and risk and compliance. And I see there's a lot of folks from Transport Canada as well as Environment Canada, SSC, CBSA, D&D, and so on. So I know that you guys, some of you have already seen some of those views with some other, use cases and some other applications that you have used in QualiWare. But what was interesting is that we actually, this particular use case, I explored it through our conversation with one of our customers. So Transport Canada, we've been in talks with one of the units, branches in Transport Canada, and they were interested in using QualiWare to track and manage credentials and training up to 7,000 people. And that's regarding to their inspectors, internal inspectors as well as external inspectors. We're talking about monitoring credentials, giving away the credentials, suspending the credentials, providing training information to those that need to take training or courses to keep their credentials up to date. So we've developed that particular use case and use for them in order to see if that's something that they would like to explore in QualiWare. And this is what happens. So requirement highlights. I'm going to give you essentially the highlights of what was their criteria. There were about 30 criteria of what they want to see as an end user. I'll give you the highlights of two. One of them is Transport Canada Authority, the issuing authority who gives away credentials, who monitors the training that the inspectors in Transport Canada has to make. They need to see the list of people. They need to see their credentials, what's the status of those credentials, as well as training. And then the second example would be Transport Canada Inspector. So the organization employee who has to have access to their training, who has to see their personal information as well as credential status. So those are the two highlights and two views that I will be showcasing today. Objectives. Some of the things we discussed when I was talking to the client and developing those views for them and readjusting those QualiWare out of the box web tiles. So they wanted simple, easy to use and traceability enabling platform. They wanted to make sure that the information is targeted to a certain stakeholder rather than having 5-6 different views that person gets lost. And we all know that we have to re-enable and remodify those views to the end users. So for them, the less was more. And finally, the automation and integration friendly tool. And that's something that QualiWare does, obviously, with its governance workflow engine, as well as the integration capabilities, such as web services and APIs. So I won't be demonstrating, just for disclosure today, any API capabilities because we did not get to that point. It's still a proof of concept with Transport, but essentially their goal was to connect that to the credential management system as well as learning management system and SharePoint or GC Docs or other file sharing systems. And that's something that QualiWare is obviously able to support. Now, I know a lot of you actually on the call right now, you do have inspectors on your own as well. So James from CBSA, or let's say Kevin from CFA, you obviously guys are a little bit familiar with the inspection process in the program. So I hope that might be closer to your field of the expertise. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I'm going to share my screen right now for the QualiWare itself.
Yeah, Kirill,
Yes.
I'll keep an eye on the chat so that you don't have to worry about that. So folks, if you do have questions, raise your hand or put it in the chat, and you can either, type it verbally or take yourself off mute. Thanks, Kirill.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cecile. Okay, so we've been using one of our Discover repositories to develop that use case and remodify it. Again, I think it's not about the uniqueness, it's about the views that we prefer to select for the customer and we prefer to organize in the right format. rather than, coding or customization. There was really none of that. The goal was to really simplify. So over here, you will notice that in the roles, those four top roles, TC Inspector Officer, TC Issuing Authority, Transport Canada Manager, and External Delegate Inspector. Those were the four views that we have developed for the customer. Again, I will be showcasing the first two just because I think they are the most relevant. I will go to TC Issuing Authority, and you will notice right away a very simplistic view. Very simplistic view, something that perhaps Adam from D&D obviously remembers, Policy and Training Compendium. Very simple, not too much of the information. You just provide really right amount of content for the end user. So TC Issuing Authority, what do they have to have? They need to have access to the inspectors, so people. They need to see the training status of those people, what kind of training they have done, what's upcoming, what have been missed, as well as they need to see credentials. Who owns what kind of credentials? What's the status of those credentials? Credentials and training. This is something that I've been experimenting with. Essentially, this would be depending on the credential and training deadlines. So let's say that somebody who holds the credentials, but their training expires earlier than those credentials, then there is a problem. The system might send you notification, or it might send you a warning message. So I will showcase that during the demo. And then finally, request for credentials / change request. This would be really out of the box, all change request, QRV, query result view, content table for some of you who know, really out of the box view. On the left side, you will notice that there's only organization. So we've cleared everything out. We just wanted to keep it very simple. If TC Issuing Authority needs to have access to maybe stakeholder models or organizational models or people. So if he wants to search it by people, those out of the box views, I have left it as is. Everything else, such as process, strategy, information, and so on, have been removed. If I go to the inspectors, I've created some of the mock-up content over here, and really the top 3 ones that we should be interested in. So we have Abigail Johnson, who is Transport Canada Inspector / Officer. We have the address, we have the city. Here is the security clearance. We might want to hold some sort of information or connect to the system that provides information on their security information or their employment status, or some sort of the additional information for us to identify that particular, let's say, inspector, identify their credential. We can also insert images. So if somebody who's an issuing authority wants to review their ID, they can do that as well over here. If they want to review their credential, what kind of credential a person has right now, well, this person is tank inspector. So she has tank inspector credential. And if we were to click on this, this would give us more information about the credential itself. We've created a dedicated governance workflow. For those who don't know what's a governance workflow, it's our automation system. This really should be able to update the credential. You will notice you can close the credential or reactivate the credential. So do some sort of manipulations as well as escalate the process in the automatic fashion using our governance workflow. Training. You can also see what kind of training person have taken. You can take a look at the particular training. Yeah, so the training, tank inspection and class training, you can take a look at it here and see who is linked by and links to and so on. And then finally, additional documentation. So somebody who's, let's say, an issuing authority wants to take a look at additional documentation and have access to it right away over here. They can click on this, and this will bring them directly to the SharePoint, and they can review the documentation externally, or this system could particularly give a person to download it. So if you just want to download the PDF file of the employment status, then you can do that, or you can view it online using the SharePoint, as I've just explained. That's the Abigail Johnson, let's say. Now we have Adam Smith, who is the actual TC Issuing Authority. So that's the role he in right now. And then we got Aisha Cormier, who is the external delegate. And then we can see their information is a little bit different from Abigail's. So for them, it was really key to identify what type of the employees we're dealing with. Are those external delegates, contractors, or are those, internal employees? And then the information would change depending on what kind of employment status they have. So that's the first view. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So everything is really so far pretty much out of the box, or could be configured out of the box with an ease of QRV. Training status and validation. They wanted to see what kind of training people need to take. So we got Abigail Johnson that needed to take three type of training. Let's say 30 inspections, practical training. Then there is an occupational health and safety, and then there is tank inspection. And we'll notice there was a documentation, so they needed to have the access to those certificates. We want to take a look at what kind of training people have taken, and then can I take a look at their certificate of completion? Fantastic, it's right there. Training status. I want to know what kind of training status there is in for a particular training. What type of training it is? Is it technical? Is it safety? Is it business training? What's a start date? What's an end date? What's the duration? Content. So this particular content link, this would link it directly to the LMS system, learning management system. And again, this could bring them directly to, in this example, this is Viva Learning, but this could be any other learning management system. And what it does, it really provides a one-stop shop for both people who need to review the content as far as training, but for both who need to take the training. So just having one view, I need to take 30 inspections, practical training. Okay, this is the link. I click on that, and here we go. I go in and do the training. You can see the provider. You can see a teacher who is it issued by. So there's a lot of attributes and properties that's available to manage and track training. Now, what's interesting also is that I've created also a training management, a governance workflow. And that's going back to this automation process, right? So we have an employee, let's say a manager, they are taking the training. Well, it is in progress right now. And then there could be two paths. Well, one of them is complete, let's say, but the other one is failed. Person have failed it, or person haven't taken the training within the time limits. Well, the process might get escalated, and then the escalation could be going up to their manager, and there could be an email sent out to those escalation parties to notify that there's an issue going on there. So all of that could be easily and effectively achieved through our governance workflow engine. That's on the training statuses and training updates. You will notice that when I click on any of those trainings, you will get the updates, and then obviously the training statuses will be reflected here as well. So somebody who needs to see the training for the folks that are part of your team, they will be able to see it here. Any questions so far? Okay. Credentials. So the next one was credentials. And in the credentials field, I've used a template called certificates in QualiWare. And in certificates, those last two that I created as the example, TC Marine Inspector credentials, that's Aisha is actually owns that particular credential. And then Abigail is the tank inspector. So we see the activation date. We see the expiry date, we see when it expires. We also see the training or what kind of conditions are required to get that particular credential. So we notice that in TC Marine Inspector, person needs to take marine training, and then if they tank inspector, then they need to take all of those particular trainings in order to have a good standing certificate or credential in place. And then we see who's it issued by, who have issued that particular credential, and then what certificate number of that credential, as well as what's the status of that credential. If I was to click on activation, I'm going to activate that particular credential, and then I will suspend it. and then I will reactivate that. So you will notice that we have the credential management workflow. It's really a copy of the change management. Some of you guys are familiar with that. I really wanted to keep the process simple, but this could be as complex or as simple as you want that to be. But you really see that here we have the new credential. We can activate that, and we can roll back the process from suspension to the new credential, or we can just close it and then retire the credential. So if I was to reactivate the actual credential, I should be getting an email, and here we go. I did receive an email, and then in the email you will notice that it gives me a notification saying that the inspector credentials has been moved into development. Actually should have said reactivated, but it really gives the link to the credentials, and you can follow the changes and essentially do your actions or escalate the process. So this is where the automation comes in, and this is where they really saw the value in managing the credentials and training, is that you could monitor as well as automate that process of notifications, as well as following up people, those who didn't do the training, or those credentials that are getting expired. Listen, you can get an email notification without doing it manually. So that's really how I've built that particular content table. In the edit here, you will notice that there's a couple of fields here to fill out. So there's a name, there's a type, there's conditions, there's issued by. So all of those particular fields that you see here have been filled out, and you can place the achieve date and then set the education components and training related aspects to this particular certificate or credential. Okay, I'm going to go to another view. Any questions so far?
No, nothing yet, Carol.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next one would be credentials and training expiry dates and date checks. So this one was really experimental. I wanted to use, there was one of the QRVs available out of the box regarding to dependency of the IT systems to their IT components. And this was really just for the proof of concept that we have the IT credentials here, and then here's the credential expiry date. And here is the IT training that has to be taken in order to have those IT credentials up to date. And what's the training expiry date on them? So if we were to see this particular warning, so okay, if the training gets expired before the actual credential expiry date, then we might get the warning. If the training expired after the credential is expired, then we okay. So you see the logic. Essentially, those people that did not do the training on time or don't have the training in place, then they should not have the credentials in the first place. So the system can send a warning notification, or it can send an okay message if everything isn't in place. And obviously this could be a color coded, so there could be a color coded as yellow or red. Whenever there's any issues in place, the system can provide those traffic light system to give the highlights. And then finally, the last but not least, request for credentials. So the authority needed to have access to all of the change requests, so all of the credentials that the other folks have been submitted. So there is an application for the credential, and I need to see the list of them. So this is really a list of the change requests, but again, this could be easily applicable to the credentials or anything else. And then here's, you have the name, you have the sequence ID, responsible, who is it originated by, originated date, due date, approved by, and so on. But really here was really a one place where a person can view what's happening with my requests. And this is something that DC Issuing Authority had to have. And then at the top, you will notice that there's a couple of buttons there, and this would really create the change request, creating the new credential request, or we also were discussing an activation credential and suspension credential automatically as well. Now for that simulation, obviously the connection to the credential system would have to happen. There's an integration work in place, but this is something that definitely could be done in QualiWare. Any questions so far? So just by having those 5 tiles, it would give organizations that have a need for managing credentials and managing the training really a one-stop shop to find out what's happening with the training, who've been taking what kind of training, and if there's any credential component in that, this could be easily managed and effectively in QualiWare. I'm going to go to another view. I'm going to go to the view for TC inspector. And this would be really an isolated content that the inspector needs to see. So right now I'm in the view for Abigail. And Abigail needed to view her own content. She needed to know that what's the address, so she can update the address or, security clearance information, or there's a new ID, let's say she needs to upgrade or, update, then she could do that directly in the content table here. She could see what kind of credentials she owns and then the training, as well as any documentation that's under her profile. So you will notice that the view changed from thousands of people and inspectors. It goes directly just to Abigail. Then we would take a look at the upcoming training. So Abigail needs to take 30 days or 30 inspections of practical training in order to become fully registered and certified tank inspector. So there is a prerequisite in place: tank inspection, in-class training. And if you want to read in that, take a look at this training. You can do that right here, as well as see what's the status of that particular training, what's the start date, how long is that particular training is going for, as well as link to training. So that would bring me directly to Viva Learning, or again, if there would be any other learning management system, we would be able to have the link to that, or potentially we could use one of our web services to showcase and have in-frame directly in QualiWare access to their LMS system. And then you can see who's the provider and then certificate of completion. When somebody would complete the training, they would be able to upload that, or the system automatically be able to upload that to QualiWare using API integration. My credential status. So Abigail needs to know what's happening with my credentials. And now she only gets access to her own credential, tank inspector, credential holders, and then the activation date, expiry date, what kind of training and conditions required, again, who is it issued by, what's the certificate number, and what's happening to that right now. Well, it is suspended. And then obviously she could go in and there could be an additional column for comments of why it has been suspended. Maybe it's the training that's been missing. Maybe there's something else going on here. And then new credentials, so requested new credentials. In this particular case, I use just the out-of-the-box change request, but it's really requesting anything you want, really. And this could be, she could fill out the name and then set the priority and set who's responsible, description. Obviously, those things would be filtered and curated, but essentially, this could be one of the web forms where inspectors would fill out their information and fill out the request for the credentials when they are up to due or on the renewal time itself. So I'm just going to move the Teams bar. Okay. And then as well as my request. So if Abigail needed to see what's happening with my credential request or any other request that she has made regarding to training, there could be a window with a name, who's responsible, when it was last modified, as well as the status of that particular request. And then finally, if Abigail needs to have access to the Center of Excellence or any other documentation externally, there could be a dedicated tile for that. And that's really it on the use case. So those two views really demonstrate how we could curate the content and make it traceable in regards to credentials and training. Really has nothing to do with enterprise architecture or business process management in this case. This would be really a very kind of operational approach that Transport Canada was interested in using QualiWare for. And thus I thought that this could be applicable really to a lot of different organizations and departments that are here on the call. So if anybody who wants to, organize this type of a training and credential cluster within QualiWare, this could be one of the ways to achieve that. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions, Kirill. The different roles that you showed as you went through the demonstration, what types of QualiWare licenses did those use?
Fantastic question. So for those two roles that I showcase right now, just to view the content, you need a collaboration license, which is a very affordable license right now for Government of Canada. So if I was to click on Abigail, let's say, and then Abigail needs to view the content only, that's the collaboration license. If I need to update anything, like create the new credential, or let's say TC issuing authority needs to update anything, then you would need to have a plus license for that. Does that address your question, Cecilia?
It does. When you set this up though and did the different configurations in the tool, you used an architect license to do that?
I did, yes. You need to have an architect license to set this up. That's right. Okay. Yeah, and then once you have that, somebody who just views the content and reads on that, they just need the collaboration license, as well as if they need to suspend the credential. Let's say if TC issuing authority needs to suspend any credentials, right over here, you do not need to have a plus license. The collaboration license would be sufficient to get that done. Create the comment, you only need a collaboration license. Create the change request, you only need the collaboration license. If you do need to open for the actual credential and make the fill out of that information, you need to have a plus license.
Other question, I know you didn't show all of the integrations with the APIs and things like that, but approximate level of effort involved in setting this up?
Yeah, so that really depends on the other systems on the other side, but having this set up and integrated with, let's say, SharePoint, or having the links set up like I was just showcasing here, with the LMS and then the documentation, the level of effort is very, very light. It's very, very easy to get that set up. Feeding the data dynamically and constantly within the learning management system, or let's say credential management system, that would depend on how complex that particular system is. And this could be, moderate level of effort, like we've found with our Azure DevOps integration. If we have Michael Rowe on the call, he can confirm that just by doing a little bit of investigation and some work, we could effectively, integrate Azure DevOps with QualiWare. So similar approach could be done with LMS and credential management systems.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I do have a question. Well, we do have a couple of folks that do have inspectors and inspection staff in their departments. Kevin or maybe James from CBSA, do you see this kind of use case could be effective in your departments?
Yeah, this is James. I'm thinking about it, so I don't have an answer now. Ever since you started doing the demo, it's interesting, the use case. Yeah, we may have it for something different, but not too sure at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, Kevin here. I think same here. Like it is very interesting. We do have a system already at the agency, but I'm not sure it's as comprehensive as this one is. So yeah, it's definitely worth looking into.
Worth looking into, Kevin. And you already guys own the licenses. So
yeah,
it would not cost you anything else except for the collaboration licenses for most of the folks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Something that everyone should remember about this too is that this use case that we're showing was put together in a very, very short time. So what you're actually seeing here is actually a fairly comprehensive system for something that was put together for, a demonstration of capabilities. So if you're actually talking about, a low cost, low code application built in QualiWare, this is a pretty good example of that in what can be done, in a very short time.